Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be looking at a poem written by one of my students who's in high school. She's a very gifted writer, and honestly, there's not much um, to fix in the sense that it's very well written already. I'm not just saying that because I don't want to spend time on it or anything like that. So, anyways, um, so on the left column is the poem written by my student, and on the right side is the poem that won a gold prize. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna read it stanza by stanza, and then kind of go over what I think was done well and areas that could be improved upon. Okay. All right. So I'll read the first stanza. In my small pocket of the world, a corner where even the earth itself seems to have given up on a place where there was no tomorrow, there was you, the thinnest layer of paint upon a canvas of gray, the one who brought color back into my life. So I think this is a very powerful opening. So we start with this metaphor, and poetry is really a play on words, like music, and also, but more than like a song, it's more about like metaphors, imagery, and wordplay. Okay, so here, in my small pocket of the world. Okay, so once again, are we talking about like your literal pocket, or this idea of the world being almost like a microcosm? Okay, so in other words, is the world something that you could almost place inside your pocket because it feels so small? All right. So we have this sense of bleak atmosphere. Uh, so the idea that there's no hope, okay? There's no tomorrow. And I really like this metaphor once again. The thinnest layer of paint upon a canvas of gray. Mhm. So once again, it's kind of interesting why, because canvas, if you're going to paint, is usually white, but here it's gray. So in other words, why would the painter paint on a gray canvas? So I think that's kind of thought provoking, and that's what good writing and good poems do. They wow you, and they provoke thoughts. So yeah, I think this is a very well done metaphor. Thinnest layer of paint upon. I wonder why it's thin though. So I'll be more kind of curious to understand. So maybe we can elaborate a little bit more on why they're painting, perhaps. So I also like this idea of bringing color back once again because it could be. I think it could work on a literal level, as in somebody inspires you to paint a beautiful painting, or it could be figurative. Bring color back, as in bring hope and joy back. Um, so I think it's very clever and very well done. All right, and then we have a good wordplay here: dull and dreary. So yeah, I think you have a natural. The writer has a natural inclination for rhythmic wordplay. Okay, dull and dreary. So that's a couple points there. That's good. So I also like the maybe it was unintentional, but there seems to be maybe a rhythm between gray and boy, canvas of gray and watercolor boy. So yeah, it's well done here, and I like this idea of emotional vacuum that kind of builds upon this idea of like the gray canvas, and then we also have dull and dreary. But I'll be curious to know. I think maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on why it's so dull and dreary. And as you do so, it doesn't have to necessarily make logical sense, but try to provide like as if you're dreaming. When you're dreaming, you have these snapshots of events. So try to provide a snapshot of why or how the speaker feels, why the neighborhood feels so dull and dreary. So we start to see this idea of survival. So once again, this is perfectly fine, but I would just try to make this more poetic. And one way you can do that is to think about how you can express this in fewer words. So prose is like explaining everything in full. Okay, it's like a an email you would write to a professor or something. Okay, uh, poetry is like drinking wine with somebody at a really nice restaurant that's not too expensive, and there's a beautiful band playing, so you can't really hear each other fully. Okay, but you're kind of shouting into each other's ear about anything, but together with the whole mood of the restaurant and the band playing, even the littlest things sound romantic and beautiful and memorable. And so you know less is more. It truly works in poetry that way. So um, yeah, so think about how you might be able to express this sentence in fewer words. Okay? And I think this is also superb use, continuing with the metaphor of painting. So you're dampening the futures here. I would just maybe specify a little bit more on what's going on here. The dampened futures. So dampen, I think you mean. Let's see, dampen meaning. Yeah. So dampen means to make slightly wet. Huh? So the question is, what's going on here? Okay. Why is the speaker trying to paint, and why is there so much bleakness going on? So maybe if you can elaborate on that. All right. And then talk about, but not mine. Yeah, I think this is a very powerful sort of assertion of autonomy, as I wrote here. So in other words, it seems like you start the poetry by describing like the atmosphere and the town, but there comes you and your sense of individuality, and that sense of individuality means I won't be necessarily 100% dictated by my environment. My environment may be bleak, but I shall rise up. That's the idea here, I think. So this is a very well done insertion here. So because I had just moved in, no future, no friends, and no one left to remember me when I was gone. Okay. So this is all fine, okay? But I would try to turn this into imagery, okay? So again, prose, it's kind of hard sometimes to distinguish what exactly poetry is. But think of poetry as the little bits of things you hear, another person say while you're at a date, you know, and prose is more like a newspaper column. It's logical, explaining everything in full detail, etc., etc. So you have this: no job, no family, no friends. But think about like how you can say the same thing um, without uh, kind of explaining it. In other words, you can talk about how the calendar sits empty, waiting for appointments to be drawn or something like that. So you can talk about how the calendar looks empty or something like that. Okay? Right. And then I think let's see. Right. So okay. So next part is right. And then I'll read. Let me read the next stanza because I had just moved in and I had no future, no job, no family, no friends, and no one left to remember me when I was gone. So I would waste away in dreams of yesterday, surrounded by broken paintbrushes and half finished thoughts, instead of being in the present. Okay, so uh, yeah, so once again, try to turn this into more imagery. Uh, but I like this sense of loneliness that you're trying to convey, this sense of solitude. Mm. Waste away in dreams of yesterday. Yeah, I think it's a very beautiful expression. Uh, but yeah, I would be curious to know why. What's tormenting somebody? And again, once again, try to express that in imagery. And imagery is really painting a scene, but with words. So your poem is about a painter, but metaphorically speaking, you yourself are a painter as well, in the sense that you're drawing a picture for us. Okay, so I think this idea of hopelessness, especially given the state that America is in right now, hopeless, it can resonate. Okay, so um, but you can perhaps give us a sense of why. So in other words, prose is I am depressed because I have no job and family and friends. Okay, but poetry is saying the same thing but indirectly. Okay, maybe um, you describe the scars if the person is a veteran. You know, yes, waste away in dreams of yesterday, and maybe you can like talk about the scars on their back or something. So if you watch like TV shows, you know how you have scene by scene. Those are actually all written in this thing called like screenplay. So think of yourself as like writing a screenplay essentially. And just as in TV shows, not everything has to make sense. Sometimes it's deliberately mysterious to to pique interest. So it doesn't have to be logical necessarily. Okay? So try to kind of explain a little bit more about why they feel this way. Okay? And surrounded by broken paintbrushes and half-finished thoughts. I love this imagery. I think even if you're not a painter, you can. A lot of people can probably immediately visualize this. Um, and again, I like this idea of something being broken. Here, once again, it's literal. Um, Paintbrush could be literally broken, but it could also be figurative in the sense that maybe you're a writer, but you've lost your voice. Okay, in that sense, we could say, my paintbrush has been broken as well. Okay? All right. So yeah, I would just try to continue on with this idea, but try to kind of rewrite this scene by scene, focusing on imagery, emotion, feeling, because that's what poetry is about. Poetry is about the irrational. Okay. All right. Let me read the next stanza. But then I saw you, footsteps that seemed too loud in the eerie silence of the streets, and a singular laugh so pure and clear that shattered my world of misery. Watercolor boy. Okay. So once again, um, I think I spot sort of little, inkling of great talent, maybe genius. The silence is no sound, okay? But you say it's too loud, okay? So that's exactly what poetry is, okay? Talking about a silence that is too loud, okay? That's brilliant. Um, and I think it's very thought provoking. How could that be? It's like maybe you sent somebody some texts or emails, and you're waiting for their reply every second. And in that case, the silence can be very loud as well. So I think this is very well done. All right, and then we have here once again a singular laugh, so pure and clear. So once again, here I would kind of maybe stop here a little bit and kind of fill in the storyline a little bit more. Okay, so it's important to be thought provoking, but you also want towards like as you approach the mid section of your poetry, give us some reason, justification for why things are happening. So we need to have a little bit of that. So at this point, uh, I think it might be helpful to kind of maybe give more hints about what the relationship between the speaker and the you is. And a singular laugh. Why singular? Okay. Just curious about why it will be a singular laugh. And whenever you have like a reaction, try to describe the actual like physiology of it. So if somebody is their hand is shaking because they're nervous, maybe they lied to somebody. Um, in that case, you could actually describe the action of the hand shaking, instead of saying he's nervous. Um, so you could maybe talk about your smile, and then kind of describe how it radiates or how it brightens up, but try to actually describe the physiology of the laughter. Okay. All right. And I like this sort of idea of hope coming along, uh, some sort of a laughter kind of rescuing you from the bleakness. Okay, so there's hope there. All right. And then let me read the next stanza. Watercolor boy, how you arrived at the front door of my house, and how I selfishly ignored those brown eyes swollen with tears that would not fall, limbs and artwork of sickly purples and greens, choosing instead to focus on the smile plastered onto your pale lips and your spirit that refused to die. Watercolor boy. All right. So we have here movement. Okay. So the boy arrived, and we have a very emotional point here. So I think this is what I meant earlier, like describing the physiology, and I think you do an excellent job here. Swollen with tears that would not fall. Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of us have had moments in our lives when we, couldn't cry, but almost had to, so we try hard to hold back. So there's this density of emotion here, and you built it up really well. Um, I would just maybe add a little bit more about why the speaker might ignore the boy, because it's a powerful statement here. And then you also have like boy. Okay, so you always want the speaker to be liked by the readers, to have the readers' empathy. Like you want the readers to be cheering on the speaker, like no matter how bad of a situation he's in. At least when you're reading his poem, you can't help but root for him because you can see things from his world, from his vantage point so well. And when you can do that, see things truly from the other person's perspective, that's when you can kind of understand and commiserate uh, their hurt and all that. And so, uh, limbs and artwork of sickly purples and greens. Mhm. So yeah, I think this is a very poetic expression. Um, Curious about what you actually meant. All right, so I think another sort of expression that kind of shows great talent or potential for great talent is this part. If my interpretation is correct, I think you might be describing maybe like bruises, sickly purples and greens, um, limbs and artwork of. So maybe you're kind of using like the arm as like the metaphor for canvas, and you're describing the bruises on the arm. That's my understanding. Um, which, if it is, it's extremely sophisticated and genius level. I think personally. Um, so I think, but this is extremely like subtle, but it hints at something larger. Maybe the speaker experienced, domestic abuse or something like that, something terrible like that. Um, so it piques the reader's interest, and we want to find out more. And that's exactly what good writing is. Writing, in its essence, is really entertainment. As long as you give someone, if someone enjoys reading your work, or either cries or laughs or otherwise enjoy it, then you've done your job. Okay, so and I think this is really well done here. So um, we can perhaps kind of go back and kind of integrate this theme, if I'm reading correctly, of this domestic violence happening, and that's why the speaker is kind of depressed. I'm not sure, but we can go over that. And I also like your alliteration here of plastered, pale lips. Okay, so once again, I think before you used dreary and dull, and now plastered and pale. This is really well done, and it's exactly what you're supposed to do in poem writing. So well done here. Mhm. And the plastered, it also works well because it's like an artwork. Where I think like when you draw frescoes or something, you plaster the wall with paint. Um, so this idea of being plastered has a sense of artificiality. Maybe the smile isn't genuine. Okay? But either way, yeah, I can. Pale lips also kind of convey this continues on with the sense of bleakness that we noticed earlier with the neighborhood. and in your spirit that refused to die. Okay, wow. So I feel like you're almost like drawing a contrast between artwork and real life, but maybe they kind of crisscross and maybe kind of mirror each other. I'm not sure, but it's very poetic here how um, you talk about bleakness, but at the same time, there's glimmer of hope coming in. So I think your strength as a writer here is uh, aestheticizing what hurts. Um, so, which is kind of hard to do as a young writer. Um, but so I think you're showing remarkable maturity as a writer. Um, there's this expression: take your pain and turn it into art. Right. So there's this expression, something along the lines of take your pain and turn it into art. So for a lot of artists and writers especially, um, painful moments are somehow the greatest moments of inspiration. Um, so this is very artistically sophisticated and well done. Um, and I just some other possible kind of expressions, maybe just suggestions, going along with the silence too loud, that part. Maybe you can also talk about how something unsaid but heavy. So once again, um, silence, something is too loud, something's unsaid but it's heavy. Like it's kind of paradoxical, but it's also thought provoking, and it's also kind of a wordplay. You're playing with antonyms. So yeah, perhaps you can insert that somewhere along here as well. Yeah. So in class, I would like to compare your essay with the the gold prize winners, but I think yours is comparable certainly, and perhaps even better. Personally, I think. But I mean, that's the thing about judgment, especially when you judge like artwork. It's kind of subjective. But I think objectively, you have a lot of potential. So I would kind of keep uh, doing what you're doing, but focus on the things I talked about. Focus more on imagery. So whenever you read a line that does not provide an image, then that's prose. So you would think about how to turn that into like an image. Okay. Um, but overall, I think it's fantastic, uh, fantastically done. So we can kind of compare in class with the past winners and talk about uh, what things you can add from their essay into your own. But so far I want to say you have tremendous talent as a writer, and yeah, this is brilliant. This is brilliant. So keep doing what you're doing, but let's tweak a little bit things here and there, and I'll also give you some suggestions about message. Okay, like how to sort of craft a message into your narrative. I think that's something that could benefit you as well. But overall, I think this is excellently done. So good job, and I hope to see you in class.